Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Mohsin, can you confirm me if I am clearly audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you, Mohsin. So let's start. We have waited for participants to join, and I think we have now enough. They will keep on joining. That is a bit of interruption, but let's see how can we deal. Okay, so again, Assalamu alaikum and hello everyone. I welcome you all in this session prepared, maintained, and presented by Microsoft Learn Student Ambassadors Community IM Sciences. Let me admit them all.
Thank you. Walaikum salam, sir. Welcome.
Thank you, Saif.
Jawad,
For now,
sir, do you recording the lecture? Do you record
yes,
the
Saif.
lecture?
Yes, Saif, I have started the recording.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay, so a little about me. I'm your speaker and let's call it instructor in this session. My name is Jawad Amin. I'm a final year student of BCS, Bachelor of Computer Science at IM Sciences, Peshawar. I'm a web developer and a freelance writer. I have keen interest in data science and machine learning, and that is where I suppose I belong in the future, and I'm gradually pursuing my career in the mentioned field. If I'm ever asked why I'm into web development, if in the long run I want to work in altogether a different field, right? It's a question. So my answer to them has been remained always that web development is my superpower. Wherever I go, wherever I would work, this skill is going to make me stand out from the rest. So this, I think, is enough for my introduction. Now, I will briefly talk about the session and its agenda. So today's session is going to be brief. I will try to wind this up in 30 to 1 hour because I'm keeping things conceptual for today, and there will be no hands-on today, and we will be doing the extensive stuff tomorrow. So we are just building the ground for tomorrow's work, but today's session is still going to be very informative, that is for sure. The medium of conveying lesson in this session would be mainly English, but I'm pretty much comfortable with Urdu as well as Pashto. And I will try to code switch, that means shift from English to Urdu where I feel I should, but I allow you all to interrupt me at where you need me to speak something in Urdu or Pashto specifically. I won't mind that because the intent here is conveying the lesson, right? So no matter what language that may be, though the requirement from the program which I am part of, that is Microsoft Learn Student Ambassadors Community, is that the medium should be English, but I do not mind switching to Urdu or Pashto for the purpose of conveying my lesson. Before I start with the lesson, I want to say that the content is basic, foundational, minimal, easy to grasp, and has been prepared with this thought that people with no knowing about JavaScript and programming in general would attend this session. To all the attendees, the point is that if you listen enough and if you stay attentive enough, then I promise, irrespective of your experience with the language in general, I expect and hope that you will learn something you haven't heard and learned till this time. And this is the only purpose of conducting this session. Today, we are not going to code even a line. It is about concepts and the very essential ones. I have noticed this norm here in this part of the world that we always stay eager to jump into practical, right? The practical stuff. And that makes sense, by the way, if we think into it. This makes sense that we want something practical to be done. Theory is not doing us anything because just theory is not going to make us even a single static web app. But does that mean that theory is not important? It's a question, right? Does that imply that concepts do not carry any weight? In my opinion, in my personal opinion, it does carry a huge weight and importance. You can become a moderate coder with having only practical experience and being not bothered about concepts of a particular language, but to become remarkable programmer, it takes more than just having the ability to write unoptimized code, right? So I strongly believe and suggest the juniors who are here attending this session, and I hope the seniors, if we have in this session, would agree on this, that learn the foundational concepts at least, if not more, if theory somehow kills you, right? At least the foundational concepts, and then stick to the practice, because that's where the magic happen, the magic of programming or coding happen, right? So this was about the introduction about today's event. I will present my slides so that we can begin with our today's content. Can somebody confirm me that the slides are visible?
Sir.
Yeah, it's visible.
Thank you. Okay, the program requirements also, I will need to switch on my camera if that's not a problem. Let me just a bit. Okay, so I'm switching back to my slides, and there from we will begin with our today's agenda. As I stated that I won't take much of time for today because we have extensive stuff left for tomorrow, but still we need to get our concepts clear, the basic and the essentials ones. Again, if somebody is joining now, there's a problem, but okay, let's call it the last join and we won't be interrupted for a time. We need to start our session. So I was saying I won't take much of your time. Can somebody again tell me that the slides are perfectly visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So the title is, it is in front of you all, JavaScript Essential Training in VS Code. And the subtitle is Learn, Revise Your Programming Fundamentals in JavaScript. Let me admit them for now. So the programming fundamentals in JavaScript and the practical stuff is for tomorrow. Again, I'm mentioning, but let's begin with the concepts, which I think are very important. The agenda for today's session is starting from introduction to JavaScript, introduction to VS Code, JavaScript runtime environment in VS Code, and then JavaScript training, which I call programming fundamentals in JavaScript, for a sense that we will be covering all the concepts that is there in a course called programming fundamentals, right? Now, one when I was preparing content for this section, introduction to JavaScript, I gave a lot of thought into it, that what should I come up with? What should be there so that it can make sense to the majority of my attendees, because I, again, considering the this fact that most of you will be just stepping into the world of JavaScript, and perhaps some of you would be experienced enough in this field already, but there were extensive and very dense stuff out there on internet which I could have included, but I thought it would have made sense only to the experienced ones. So I came up with this very I think useful definition of JavaScript, and I think by this we can just get clear a lot of concepts which are very essential. So what is JavaScript? If we define JavaScript, so I will just read through it, and let me tell you what I planned to more for this definition. So the definition is JavaScript is a lightweight, interpreted, or just-in-time compiled programming language with first-class functions. While it is most well known as the scripting language for web pages, Many non-browser environments also use it, such as Node.js, Apache CouchDB, and Adobe Acrobat. Now, JavaScript is a prototype-based, multi-paradigm, single-threaded, dynamic language supporting object-oriented, imperative, and declarative styles. After reading through this, I hope and I expect those who are just new to JavaScript, this would have made no sense to them, right? And that is where I have this creative way of my own teaching, that I have some bulleted points here. And this is on purpose. I want all these bulleted points to be explained further to you all, so that this particular definition that I have picked start making sense to you all, right? So now, starting with lightweight, there are people joining. So starting with lightweight, what is meant by lightweight programming languages? So lightweight programming languages are those, these four bullet points just explain pretty much all. Low CPU usage, that means consume minimal memory resources when its code or an application is running. So lightweight programming languages are those which takes less of the hardware, which involves less of the processing power and memory. So JavaScript is one of that languages, and due to this bullet, it is called lightweight. Another bullet here we have easy to implement. Easy implementation across platforms such as web, mobile, desktop, etc. So across platforms, it is easily implemented, and this is what makes it lightweight, right? Now, the third is that minimalistic syntax of JavaScript. The syntax is very minimal, simple syntax, semantics to help in learning quickly. By semantic, it means that whatever we write while coding in JavaScript quite makes sense to the coders, right? So this makes it very minimalistic in terms of syntax and easy to learn also, because it makes sense when you're writing. It's a heavy high level language, and in high level language the syntax is designed in a way that those who are stepping into learning JavaScript just find it in very easy to learn if they want to. And the third is features. Fewer built-in features than their heavyweight counterparts. Now there are lightweight programming languages and heavyweight programming languages. If we take Java, Java is a heavyweight programming language. If we take JavaScript, JavaScript is lightweight. Why it is lightweight JavaScript, lightweight programming language? It's because of these four features I have just explained. And the lightweight, this term lightweight can change into heavyweight with time, because gradually we see a lot of frameworks are coming. So the more features when embedded in a language, in a particular language, it can affect this term and our characteristic of language that we call lightweight. But still, we consider JavaScript lightweight programming language, and that is fine to professional developers. Now, second, very important concept, and it is interpreted or just-in-time compiled. Both are two different things, right? But it involves, and it is associated with our learning, our introduction to JavaScript. So I've included the slash, and we will talk into all that. Before I talk about what is interpreted or just-in-time compilation, you all should be familiar that how the JavaScript code is run. So of mainly, though it's not true for now, but mainly the JavaScript code runs in the browser, right? So every browser has a particular engine. We call it JavaScript engine, and that JavaScript engine is responsible for converting that human readable code, which is high level language JavaScript, into machine readable code, right? So the responsibility or the job of that engine is just to convert, translate what we are writing through our keyboard to what the machine needs to know, and the instructions in machine language. So the conversion happened using a particular JavaScript engine, and it is embedded in every modern browser, such as in Microsoft Edge we have Chakra, in Chrome we have V8, which is these are the names of JavaScript engines. In Mozilla Firefox we have SpiderMonkey and Safari, so on. So these are in all browsers, these are the JavaScript engines that converts the code which a web developer have written in JavaScript into machine, and then into machine code, and then it gives and it performs the functionality which is intended, right? Now, when it comes to JavaScript, so JavaScript were first interpreted language. Now, what is meant by interpreted language? Interpreted language means that the languages which use interpreter. Now, interpreter and compiler both are as I said just now. I said that JavaScript engine is responsible for converting the machine code, the human readable high level language code into machine code, machine readable, right? So it's the responsibility of their JavaScript engine. The same way we can explain it for compiler and interpreter. The job is the same. Compiler takes the high level language code and converts it into machine code, right? And the same is done by interpreter. Somebody is joining. Let me admit them all. Okay, so now see, when we talk about compiler, so compilation performs and is done in two steps. Step one involves compilation, and step two involves execution. Now, in the compilation stage, what has happened? The compiler, which is a piece of program, if I say specifically, but its job, it is this piece of code or this piece of program is designed to take the code from the developer's end, which is in high level language, and converts that into the machine readable code, machine language. Now, in compilation, the compiler takes all the code written in high level language, compile it. By compilation mean it takes the code, checks it for errors, and convert it into machine language, right? So now this is the step one which is done. We have machine code available with us, which is the result of the step one. We can see here in the compiler figure. Machine code is here. Now, if we're talking about compiler, so what it does, it creates a portable file. It creates a portable file, which in layman we have seen here. If someone even not familiar with programming, they can also understand this, that whenever we download something from internet, for example, this PPT, this PowerPoint, uh, MS PowerPoint, I'm downloading it from some browser, for example. I have downloaded it. So what I have gotten? I have gotten this portable file, which we call .exe, right? So in this portable file, what has happened that we have the compiled code, we have the machine readable code already available. And whenever now I need to run PowerPoint, I need to perform some job with PowerPoint. So I just click upon it and install it. And what has happened, the compiled portable file is now being executed, and the result is out in the form of that we use PowerPoint, MS PowerPoint then. So this is how compilation is does. Taken the source code is taken, it is converted into a portable file. It is portable because the compilation is once done. Now we don't need to compile it again and again. We have that file .exe that can be then executed for multiple times, and after so much long we want it to. So this is how compilation is done. Compilation is once, and execution can be for many times needed to as per it is needed, right? Now, in an interpreter, we do not have two steps. An interpreter, what interpreter does, it takes code line by line. Unlike to compiler, which is taking the all piece of code at once, compiling it at once, and if there are errors, the compiler will notify those errors, and after the developer or the coder programmer just debug the program, that compilation will again done. And once the compilation is done successfully, we got a portable file, and then that file can be executed for so long as we want and for so many time we want it to be executed. But in interpreter, we have only one step: execute code line by line. It takes one line, check it for errors. If there is error, the code is not the interpreter is not going to the second line until the error in the first line of code is resolved. So interpreter takes a line of code, checks it for error, and if there is no error, it executes that line. Program starts running simultaneously. So you can say that the compilation and execution is being merged into one step, and now it is taking line and executing it. Again, it takes a line and it compile it and then execute it. In interpreter sense, we can say interpret it and then execute it. So this is the difference between compiler and interpreter, which should be known to the budding programmers, right? Now, when we talk about compiled languages, the compiled languages are fast because of the fact that we do not need to compile it again and again, and we get the portable file. And interpreter languages are comparatively slow because we are executing each line again and again, with the fact involved that we are interpreting it and then executing it. Simultaneously, it is being interpreted and executed. So comparatively, interpreted languages are slow. And this was the case with JavaScript. JavaScript was slow because it was an interpreted language. But when in 2009, we get to have V8 engine in Chrome. So if I'm not mentioning the date incorrect. So with the V8, which is a JavaScript engine for Chrome, they came up with this new, you can say, technology we call just-in-time compilation. And that is where major breakthrough happens in the field of JavaScript, that now JavaScript is easy to learn and also fast. First, it was an interpreted language before V8, but then it is now interpreted. It is now not interpreted. It is now just in time compiled and also easy to learn. So this just gave a boom to the language JavaScript. Now, what is just-in-time compiler? What does just-in-time compiler having different to the compiler and interpreter in general? So in just-in-time compilation, what happens is that it is similar somewhat to compiler, but it involves the features of both compiler and interpreter. In what sense? You can see that here both compiler and just-in-time compiler figures are same, but one thing is missing, that is portable file. We have here a portable file and we do not have any portable file. So actually what it does, it compiles the code. It still takes the code line by line. It still takes the code line by line, but in a way that it is being compiled into machine code, and now it doesn't need to be compiled again, interpreted again, just we were doing in an interpreter. If we want to run the program again, the interpreter needs to before execution needs to interpret each line of code again and again. But in just-in-time compilation, that step is being you can say eliminated, and now we have the power of compiler in JavaScript in a way that we get the machine code available to us, but it is simultaneously executed at the same time. We get the compiled code, but it is simultaneously executed without saving to a file, just we do in compiler. So this is the difference between compiler and just-in-time compiler. So just-in-time compiler takes the feature of compiler, and call it just-in-time compiler means that it simultaneously in runtime takes the code, compile it, and execute it. Just not like compiler where we are storing the code to a portable file. So this was a bit of difference between compiler interpreter and just-in-time compiler. And why should we concern about just-in-time compilation? Because we know that JavaScript is there in every JavaScript engine today. In today's date, we have just-in-time compilation, and that makes it a fast language, right? Unlike to the recent edges where we were having JavaScript as interpreted language. Now, the after this, we have first class functions. Now, what is meant by first class function? A programming language is said to have first class functions when function in that language are treated like any other variable. It's very weird to see when you are switching from some other high level language such as Java to JavaScript, and you see that we can do here. What we can do here is quite weird, but it is the feature of JavaScript. For example, a function can be passed as an argument to other function. We can pass a method or a function to other functions as argument. Quite amazing to see. Can be returned by another function. A function can return another function. Very unfamiliar if you are coming from other language background. Can be assigned as a value to a variable. We can also store a function in a variable. Again, not available in other languages, right? So any language would be called first class, would be having the capability of first class functions if these are available into that. If I briefly give an example of each, so this code, we don't bother about the syntax, that is for tomorrow, but it's very simple. It will make sense to all, I'm pretty much sure. Okay, Jawad is having some issue, I guess. See, here, assign a function to a variable. Const is nothing but it's a keyword we use in JavaScript when we are creating variable. JS is the name of variable, and function. Now this is a keyword in function. A function is being declared here. Console.log works as printing something. JS function. From here, function to this, what is enclosed in the curly braces is a function. And what we have done, we have assigned this function to a variable called JS. And we can now invoke this function using not this function, because we can see we do not have any name given to this function. But what we can, how we will invoke this function, we can use this variable called JS, and using this variable we can invoke it. We can invoke the following function. So this is an example of assigning a function to a variable. In JavaScript, we have assigned a function to a variable, and it has its uses when got started with JavaScript. Second is example, pass a function as an argument. So we have a function say hello, and it is returning text hello. Now we have another function greeting with name of greeting with two arguments, with two parameters, hello message and name, right? And we are console logging here hello message with curly braces. That means that we would be giving here a function plus name. Now, what we can do is that we are invoking the greeting function, and as a first parameter, what we are, as a first argument, we are giving here say hello, which is the name of function. So again, very different. If we are coming from other languages, there we can just give a function or a method as a argument, but here we are assigning as an argument. Say hello is the name of function, and JavaScript is the second argument. Now, if we invoke it, its output is hello JavaScript. This hello is coming from this function. So this was example of passing a function as an argument. The third is return a function. Now we have a function say hello, and it is returning, see, another function. Quite good to see, returning a function which is returning another function, and there is console logging hello. So we can now we have two ways of invoking this function. We can say we can assign this hello function to a variable, my func, and then we can say invoke it using this variable, and it will return us this hello, which is the return of this which is the body of the function which is being returned to this say hello. And we can also, this is a syntax that if we use these double parentheses, so we can again invoke the function which is being returned in another function. So this was about first class functions. I suppose that many experienced developers stay unaware of this. They are good in the practical side, but again, I have in the start pressed upon the fact that why theory and concepts are important to go in to go further and to consider the advanced positions and in good companies, right? So it's good to have knowledge of all this. Now, what about non-browser environments? What is meant by non-browser environments? Anything off the browser is a non-browser environment. Here we have given two examples, Node.js. So Node.js is an open source cross-platform backend JavaScript runtime environment. What is runtime environment? That is our agenda, part of agenda for tomorrow. But it's something which, an environment in which code can be executed is runtime, right? Hello, am I audible?
Yes.
Sorry, I got
Yes.
disconnected due to some connectivity issue. I apologize for that. So let's
No problem,
resume.
sir.
So we were talking about non-browser environment, right? So non-browser environment is anything which is off the browser. Node.js is a non-browser environment, an open source cross-platform backend JavaScript runtime environment, which uses the JavaScript engine of Chrome, which is V8, right? We will be talking in detail about it tomorrow. Apache CouchDB is a NoSQL database. Now, non-browser environment, and it is this is where we see that JavaScript is not only executed in a browser, right? We can use it off the browser. We have Node.js, which utilizes JavaScript language, and through Node.js, we can develop backend application, right? And we have Apache CouchDB, which is a NoSQL database. And I was amazed to know this, that we use JavaScript for as a query language for querying this couch database, Apache CouchDB, which is a NoSQL database. We use JavaScript as a query language, just as in SQL language, in SQL databases, we use SQL language or SQL language, right? So in this Apache CouchDB, which is NoSQL database, we use JavaScript as a query language. So this stresses that we are no longer using JavaScript only in the browser, and we can take JavaScript can pretty much do anything which can be done by any other heavyweight high-level programming language, right? Now, coming to prototype-based language, it's very important topic. We say JavaScript is object-oriented, but it is not very much the same object-oriented we study in other languages. So it's bit confusion, and we can take a separate section or session only on this particular topic. This extensive this topic is, but for now, keeping it brief, do know that everything in JavaScript is an object. When we talk about class-based programming languages, the opposite of prototype-based language is class-based programming language, such as Java. In Java, we create a class which is a template for objects, right? We then, upon that template, create objects which are called instances of what we say that particular class. Let me admit them. So now class, for example, we have here this example class, and its name is animal. Now it has two instances. One is cat, the other is dog, and anything defined in this class will be automatically here in cat and also in dog, right? This is how class works, right? Class works as a template. In JavaScript, on other hand, we have everything in the form of object. We call it prototypical object, in which what happens is actually if we just restate the same scenario in the context of JavaScript. So we get here in the class-based languages, animal is a class, but in the JavaScript language, if we concern the same scenario, we will have it as object. The animal will be an object, and it can further, we can have dog and cat, which can take properties from object. This object animal can serve as a template for object dog and object cat, unlike the class-based languages in which only a class is a template for objects. But in JavaScript, we have this object which is serving as a prototypical template. It is a template which dog and cat can take properties from. And more interestingly, it is in JavaScript, now we have dog, right, which is an instance, you can say, of animal object, like it's taking all the properties of animal object, but it can define its own properties as well. Object dog can define its own properties as well. While on other hand, in class-based languages, strictly speaking, cat needs to be aware of all which is in the template, in this case, which is animal. And there are concept of method overloading and overriding, but it is just limited to this class and nothing more than that. Class and objects are two distinct entities in class-based languages, but in JavaScript we deal it differently. JavaScript is different, and we have everything in the form of objects, and one object can take properties from other object, and that the object which is taking properties from other object can define its own properties as well. So this is somehow the concept of prototype based language, and this makes the what I've just explained makes JavaScript as prototype based languages, and it has its own you can say pros and cons. Not going into detail because we need to stick to the essentials, and further you get an idea, you are interested, dig deeper, know more. The internet is full of authentic information. You need to spot for what is authentic and quality content, and then you can just explore. It depends on your interest, but you for now knowing that JavaScript is a prototype based language. Second last, I guess, the bullet, which is multi-paradigm. JavaScript is multi-paradigm. What does it mean? By multi-paradigm, I mean that JavaScript can work and can code in imperative style as well as in declarative style. Now, these are two different style of coding, or you can say way of thinking when a programmer code. So JavaScript support both imperative programming paradigm and declarative programming paradigms. It is further divided into, in imperative we have procedural programming paradigm, object-oriented programming, parallel processing approach, and for declarative programming paradigm, we have logic programming paradigm, functional programming, and database processing approach. Now, in multi-paradigm, if I a bit get into detail of what is imperative and what is declarative. So imperative, we concern how a thing is done. We need to have every detail of how a thing is done, how a program is achieving a goal. We need to have the detail of each and everything. But on the other hand, in declarative approach, we need to have our concern only with what is needed, what is the goal. So this was an example I taken from internet where a lady is booking a table, I guess. So if it is imperative approach, so see the how it would be done. I see the table over there by the gone fishing sign is empty. My husband is are going to walk towards the bar, take a right at the bathroom, walk past two tables, then sit down. Every detail till that particular table that is to be reserved is being mentioned. So this is how imperative approach works. While on other hand, if we do the same thing with declarative approach, we would just say table for two, please, and that should work fine for us. So this is the difference between imperative and declarative. And luckily, JavaScript supports both the fashion or the paradigms, which is imperative paradigm and also declarative paradigm. Again, single threaded. So it's something very technical. No, I'm not going into much technical details. It can be discussed if someone is interested, but you get a feel of that what a single threaded environment is. In a single threaded, we have one call stack. By one call stack mean every line of code is just going to a same place for execution, and until the last entered thing is not being executed, the following thing cannot be executed. This is how single thread works. So we can, by this figure, know that data and files are going to and this code. So we have this single thread, right? And through this single code, everything is being managed. On other hand, if we talk about multi-threaded environment, so in multi-threaded environment, which can be virtual also on a hardware level, that the program or the code is being divided into multiple sections, and then at the end they all get combined. But in JavaScript we don't do that. We have a single thread which deals everything. Quite complicated stuff it can deal in a quite fascinating way. Okay, so now this was about single threaded environment in JavaScript. See here, JavaScript runs on a single thread. It runs code line by line and must finish executing a piece of code before moving on to the next. And this is how JavaScript works. We call it dynamic language, a programming language that determines the type of an object, its properties and methods at runtime. By contrast, statically typed language determine that at compilation time. In JavaScript, when we are defining a variable, we don't need to define its type explicitly. It is the job of runtime environment to decide it, and it's being decided and intelligently guessed at the time of compilation or execution of the program. We don't need to explicitly tell that it is an integer or it is an let's say string or float and stuff like that. It's a dynamic language. So that's how this is what makes JavaScript a dynamic language. See, what was the purpose of looking into all these concepts? In the start, we read this definition, and I told you all that it won't make sense to many of you if they are new to the language, right? JavaScript is alive. But now, after all, which I've planned this way, that we will look into each bullet in detail, and then I am revisiting the definition we had in the start, which is now read it through yourself. I am reading it loudly. You can read it yourself and you would get to know that you know about lightweight, interpreted, just in time, first class, Node.js, Apache, prototype, base, multi-paradigm, single thread, dynamic, all have been explained, right? JavaScript is a lightweight, interpreted, or just-in-time compiled programming language with first-class function. While it is most well known as the scripting language for web pages, many non-browser environments also use it, such as Node.js, Apache, CouchDB, and Adobe Acrobat, right? JavaScript is a prototype-based multi-paradigm single-threaded dynamic language supporting object-oriented, imperative, and declarative or functional programming styles. So now I hope that it will be, something understandable. At start, I didn't think that it was this digestible as it is now. So this was about the introduction of JavaScript, which is the major part of today's agenda. And now, if what I'm left with for in today's agenda, I'm left with the history of JavaScript. Seems boring, but I promise you all that it is not boring. The history of JavaScript is not like any other history or any other history about something where things are just, a timeline from one year to another. We got facts here, and I will be explaining this history in a very interesting way, and you will find it interesting. And with this, we would, approaching the end of today's session, but let's jump into the history of JavaScript. the most used programming language has a history, and it is quite fascinating to know. So in 1990, internet was new. Someone is joining, I guess. Hello, am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So in 1999, we have just started with the history of JavaScript. In 1999, internet was new, right? And it was just like in today's age, we talk about or hear about NFTs and the Web 3.0 and stuff like that, which are not new, but to most it is something new, and it's just everywhere. In the same way, internet was there in 1990. There was internet, but it was not common, and there were sites and there were browsers, but there was no JavaScript and nothing such as anything advanced. But there were sites, and you know what they were calling the developers of those sites. Interestingly, they were called HTML authors. Quite a good name for someone who is coding, who is developing static pages, right? So in 1990, there was internet, and there, with internet there comes the need that they think we should have a good browser to view our web pages or our websites, right? Which were static, but still they were looking for some improvement on that. So they developed a browser called Mosaic. In 1993, we got Mosaic, which was the first famous browser, and it was to render static web pages made with HTML, CSS specifically. Now, what happens in 1994? The developers of Mosaic thought that browser is a good business. Why not we develop another browser and commercialize it? So they established their own company. The founders of Mosaic browser developed this their own company. Let me admit this guy. They developed their own company called Netscape, right? Netscape was the company that developers of Mosaic established. And they developed a browser called Netscape Navigator, and it was paid. People who need to use this browser would have to pay for it. So this is how the browser Netscape Navigator came into scene. Now, Microsoft got into the competition, and in 1995, they developed Internet Explorer, right, which was free. Why I call it interesting, whatever we have, the very advanced form of JavaScript that we have in this day, in today, is the result of a healthy competition formed there between companies. And this is in the slide in front of you. You can see Netscape developed Netscape Navigator, which was paid. Microsoft, which was at that time even a huge company in comparison to Netscape, they developed Internet Explorer and embedded into their Windows at that time, and they made it free. So this was the competition that Microsoft wanted to take the lead, and what they did, they developed the same browser, which their Internet IE, Internet Explorer, was doing the same job as the Netscape Navigator. So this is how Microsoft was taking the lead. Then Netscape developers or Netscape founders thought that what should we do now? They approached Sun Microsystem, which was working on Java. high level language, right? It was very famous that time. It was in phases of development and somehow out in the market. So there was just sort of everyone was talking about Java. So Netscape approached Java Sun Microsystems and with the thought that if they can embed Java into their Netscape Navigator browser, they thought, let's do it. Let's bring something which can make our static web pages a bit functional and add some interactivity to the pages which is being viewed in Netscape Navigator. So they approached Sun Microsystem for the purpose, but they gave up on that. They thought, why not we develop our own language? And they asked that, can we create a new language for the purpose I just mentioned? They wanted their browser to have some functions or some capability that can render some pages which are interactive and not just static. They hired Brandon H. and the guy took only 10 days to develop a language and they called it Mocha. Brandon H developed and took only 10 days. It's somehow inspirational for me being computer science student. The guy developed Mocha, a language, and gave that to Netscape and they try to embed it into their Netscape Navigator. With Mocha, they did Netscape, they launched the second version or the updated version of Navigator, Netscape Navigator, their browser called that Navigator 2. The Mocha was renamed to LiveScript and LiveScript was then renamed to JavaScript. But bear the fact that JavaScript got nothing to do with Java at that time, neither it is having anything similar. It is similar in terms of syntax, you can say, and some concepts are copied from the Java language, but altogether, technically speaking, it's different and both have, sorry, no relation as such. So why they include the name Java in JavaScript? It was a marketing strategy. They thought with this we would we would attract better reach. So they embed their JavaScript into Navigator 2 and this way their Navigator 2 Netscape Navigator 2 browser be became more efficient than the Internet Explorer, which were having no other language and there were just only static pages, right? But Microsoft was still in the competition. They reverse engineered JavaScript. Somehow they created their own language called JScript, right? And they embedded their Internet Explorer. So now again both get the same, but Microsoft is taking the edge because now they have another language but they are giving it free. But on the other hand, Netscape Navigator 2 was paid. This was the story of 1995. In 1995 to 1997, Netscape thought, now what should we do? How to go further in the market? They approach ECMA International, which is a sort of institution or a body that standardize languages and things related to computer science, right? So they approached ECMA so that any further future development made upon JavaScript would follow a standard, right? And this way, in 1997, ECMA International created the standard, developed a standard, and the standard was named ECMA Script. And in 1997, they launched the first version of that standard. It was JavaScript, but now under something more acceptable and professional, you can say. So we got 1997 ECMAScript 1, then ECMAScript 2, then ECMAScript 3. From 1997 to 1993, we got these three versions of ECMAScript. What happened in 1999 to 2000, if some of you would have heard about dot-com bubble. What is dot-com bubble and what is dot-com bubble burst? If someone was not knowing, this is a time I'm giving you this bit of information that there was time if I read through it, the dot-com bubble, also referred to as the internet bubble, refers to the period between 1995 and 2000 when investors pumped money into internet-based startups in the hopes that these fledgling companies would soon turn a profit. As I said, in 1990, everyone was talking about internet, so the investors, were very attracted to this new field, this new era, and this new domain where they could have invested their money, and they invested. But there comes a time when um, everything got opposite to their expectation, and that is why they refer it to as bubble, because it was not something very solid. All were investing just in the hope that it will return a profit, but things didn't work that way, and the stock market crashed in the US. So that's where we call it. Then the term came into picture. Dot-com bubble burst in 2000. Dot-com bubble and stock market crash was one of the largest crashes in the US. The dot-com boom in the late 1990s led to the dot-com bubble. 1990 was a time when the dot-com bubble was formed, and then in 2000 it was time that that bubble was burst, which then burst and led to Nasdaq, which was that which was a famous US market, crashing badly. So it has impact on all the companies of their time, and Netscape was one of that. In 1990 to 2000, Netscape was suffering in terms of their finances, and there was time in 1999, Netscape, due to all the loss and suffering, it got solved. It was acquired by a company called AOL, and what they did, which I appreciate in a way, that they take their paid browser Netscape Navigator to they took the source code and made it open source. This was the last thing before selling the company. And reincarnation, or you can say what happened to that open source, the code they made open source. The Mozilla Firefox is, to add to your knowledge, Mozilla Firefox is, you can say, the new form of that Netscape Navigator too. So the Mozilla Firefox is made upon that code, right? So this was interesting for me. Now, what happened to ECMAScript? What next version? What happened to the next version of ECMAScript? There comes a time when they were trying to add lot of functions and functionalities and features into JavaScript, and they thought then they will launch ECMAScript 4, but they couldn't do that due to any reason. So ECMAScript 3.1 with major updates came into picture, and then for ECMAScript 4, the the story is that there was a company called Macromedia. They developed their own language called ActionScript, but that ActionScript was later renamed as ECMAScript 4, and this was something not very famous and not very useful, and developers are the people in the field call it just a crap version. But this was the story with the after ECMAScript 3 and how we got ECMAScript 4. In 2005, there comes a big breakthrough, that there comes an Ajax, which is a concept, single page application with the if we talk about, we are not talking about Ajax, but in 2005 a paper published, and there were concepts about Ajax and how can we embed it into our web development, and things were getting better for JavaScript then. After ECMAScript 4 in 2005, till 2005 we are not having any latest version after ECMAScript 4, right? After ECMAScript 4 we are not having any other language. SPA with the concept of Ajax, there the possibility we got of single page application, but still in 2005, though Ajax with Ajax, we could say that JavaScript is has gotten better, but still it was interpreted language, just as I mentioned in the start. It was easy, but it was not fast. I mistakenly written here fast, but it was slow actually. Here it was slow. When it was interpreted, it was slow. Luckily, in 2008, when Chrome introduced its own JavaScript Engine V8, they included there in just-in-time compiler. So now we have easy language, easy JavaScript, which is easy to learn, and as well as it is fast because now we have just-in-time compiler embedded for compilation or for execution of our JavaScript code. In 2009, JavaScript came out of the browser, and now with Node.js, we can use it in our non-browser environments as well. We can do the server-side programming. We can develop the backend application with JavaScript and whatnot. So this was a story of 2009. Let me admit some, okay, nobody's here. Then in 2009, we got another version of JavaScript, the ECMAScript 5. You can say that after ECMAScript 3, which was there in 2000, in 1999, we got ECMAScript 3. Till 2009, we didn't had any major improvement in terms of updates or features in JavaScript. But ECMAScript 5 got very famous. It got very famous because of the features it brought. Then in 2005, in 2015, see the gap. So the more features they include in ECMAScript 6, and till time it was something very famous version of ECMAScript JavaScript. So ECMAScript 6 was released in 2015, and onwards they thought that they will release yearly versions, right? Yearly releases happen, and nomenclature is also considered to be changed from. We were calling in ECMAScript 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 until 6. It was 6, but onwards they thought that since we will be releasing it every year, so let's call it with its year number. So 2000 in 2016, we can say that they released ECMAScript 2016, which is also ECMAScript 7. Then in 2017, they released ECMAScript 2017, which is also ES 8, right? And in this year, 2022, I think in June, they have released the latest ECMAScript 2022. So this is how the language, which was just, an outcome of a competition, gotten into so much phases of improvement that today JavaScript is the most used language in our industry, right? A bit of bonus lesson for today's session. I would, after that, conclude. We are done with the history of JavaScript. You can further explore it yourself, but you have gotten the very important bits related to the history of JavaScript. In the bonus lesson, I'm just explaining the scenario that how a website is viewed. A user uses a browser, he enters a URL, right? And this URL is a request to our domain name server, which is a DNS server, and this DNS server just directly to the server. Whatever we get on our browser or in front of our on our screen is saved somewhere, is published, is hosted somewhere on a physical machine. We call that
जी माइक म्यूट है।
Hello, am I audible now? Hello.
जी माइक
Okay.
ऑडिबल है।
ये अभी म्यूट हुआ कि पहले से म्यूट हुआ था?
ये जो आपने दोबारा ज्वाइन किया उस टाइम वेट
नहीं, कौन से स्लाइड्स के बाद माइक म्यूट हुआ है? क्या आप मुझे बता सकते हैं? मैं स्लाइड्स पर जा रहा हूँ।
यूएस स्लाइड है ना
ये वाले?
नो जवाद भाई, वो हायरार्की जो थी आगे,
जो हायरार्की जो है ना,
ये वाली?
ये वाला, यस यस।
इधर से सिर्फ म्यूट हुआ है, इससे पहले तो मैं अनम्यूट था ना?
जी जी, इससे पहले अनम्यूट थे।
ओके, थैंक यू सो मच। ऐसा ना हो
नहीं,
कि
ये
वो पिछले
मुझे
स्लाइड्स भी
पता है
मैं म्यूट था।
कि ये मेरे साथ ये 30 है कि किसी को एडमिट करूं या
आपके पास है?
जी जी, यहाँ पे मेरे साथ आ रहा है। असल में मेरा ये माइक्रोसॉफ्ट का अकाउंट है, तो
अगर आप
यहाँ
कर सकते
पे
हैं तो करो शाफ, अगर आप कर सकते हैं तो करें।
सही
यू वुड बी डूइंग मी अ हेल्प। कर
सही
सकते
है।
हैं तो जो आ रहे हैं
मैंने
उनको
अभी
एडमिट कर
2-3
लिया
बंदों
करें।
को एडमिट कर दिया है।
Okay, you are allowed to do that. Okay, so let's get done with our today's agenda. We are just, approaching the end of the session. So this was the time when I got muted. I don't know why. So I was talking about, this is a bonus lesson. We are pretty much done with the agenda. So I was interested and I wanted to give a touch to this slide, that how a user gets something on a website, right? In a browser. So what a user does, that he or she enters a URL, and the URL, is directed towards a server. And before main server, it can reach the DNS server, which is domain name server, which translate a particular URL into its respective IP, and then it is being received by the server, and server then respond to the request which we have entered in the search bar, and we receive the output on our website in the matter of milliseconds. Now, I was talking that in the front end here on website, we use HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, right? But before 2009, we were not able to use this JavaScript off this browser. JavaScript was only here in the website for interactivity and for functionality purposes, but we were not able to use it in anywhere. But now, after after the release of Node.js after 2009, here in server side portion, where the server is located, where the server is resided. Actually, now before Node.js, we were doing it with PHP, Python, Java, with any high-level programming language. We were doing those stuff. But after the release of Node.js is powered by V8 engine, and with this, we can now use JavaScript for server-side programming. We can handle these incoming requests, and then these responses coming out of this from the server side to the website front end, that can also be now dealt with JavaScript. So this was something that after Node.js, JavaScript had gotten more famous, and it has become the most used programming language still in this year. And here I have taken this snap from Stack Overflow survey in 2022, marks JavaScript 10th year in a row as the most commonly used programming language. So see, professional, there were the newbies learning to code, but I just clicked upon the professional developers and their review and their feedback. We can see that 69.9% are going with JavaScript. So JavaScript is the most used language, and it will remain the most used, and more improvement is being made upon the latest versions coming out there this year and will come out next year and next year. So if you're interested in, uh, getting into this tech field, learn JavaScript. It is easy to learn and it is rewarding in all senses. So this was the end of our today's session, and we can talk about introduction to VS Code today, but I think our time is almost, we are approaching 11 o'clock, 11 p.m. and we will just end it here so that we can resume from introduction to VS Code, and then there will be practical stuff if I give a bit about what we are going to do tomorrow. So we will start with the introduction to VS Code, which is just, a small part of our content, just a bit info about VS Code, and then the hands-on will be started, and I will be, switch to my code editor, and there we will talk about what I have called here in the first slide, which is learn. If you are new, learn. And if you are not new and already in the field, revise your programming fundamentals in JavaScript. We will go through all variables and functions and control structures and stuff like that, and some advanced concepts in JavaScript also. So after tomorrow's session, I hope that those who are just stepping into this world of JavaScript would have a sound foundation, and they would just be ready to build upon that. And those who are already into JavaScript and perhaps who are better than me in terms of having knowledge of JavaScript, I still see the margin and the possibility that they would have learned something new out of this conceptual part and theory, and from tomorrow what we will be doing actually. So I will switch back to my MS Team. Let's stop the recording, and I will switch open my camera, and let's open it for discussion. So if there is any question, so I will be happy to answer, and then we will conclude our session. So do we have any question from anyone? Anyone can unmute.
Jawad bhai.
Jisha. Jisha.
Is there any platform where we can get a certification of to be a
Sorry, I didn't hear you clearly at the end. Can you repeat? Do you have anybody else who want to interact or ask any question? They are welcome to unmute their mic. Okay, let's do a thing. I want you all to leave a message that done for tomorrow or something like that, so I get to know that I'm not talking to my screen only. If you're not, who is raising a hand?
Sir,
G sir, please.
sir, can you tell me what is the VS Code and nothing more? VS Code.
Okay, so
because I am joined the now.
okay, so you have missed. Still, we haven't talked about VS Code actually. I just told in the slide where the VS Code was mentioned that we will continue from this slide tomorrow, inshallah. So I'll be talking about VS Code tomorrow, and I think that there you will get everything about VS Code. What is code editor? What is an IDE? What is the difference? So we'll be doing that tomorrow. So if that is okay for you, and no worries, the session is being recorded, and if you are there in the group, in the WhatsApp group, you can join. I will be sharing the recording there shortly, and also I will be sharing the YouTube channel tomorrow in the chat. So there I will also be uploading this recording. So no worries about that if you have missed any part.
Okay, sir.
Right?
Sir, VS Code just a editor. It means.
VS Code is a code editor, right?
Yes, sir. Sir, can you tell me ECMAScript or ESX? And
G?
what E6 ECMAScript language.
See, this is the release from ECMA International. As I said, that we had these versions. It started from ECMAScript 1, and today in this year we have ECMAScript 2022. ECMAScript 6 was released in 2025, and which is still used by developers because it depends upon the browser is compatible enough to deal with the updates. Which is there in the latest versions. For example, if I use ECMAScript 2022, there will be something included in ECMAScript 2022 that many browser won't support. So for that reason, due to this compatibility issue, we then prefer a stable version, which is ECMAScript 6, and many professional developers use ECMAScript 6.
Yes, sir. 2025 to 2015.
Exactly, 2015 to 2015. We call ECMAScript 6 as 2015. We can refer to it as 2015 also.
Okay, sir. Sir, can you send the ECMAScript slide or anything? Video.
I have talked about in detail about the versions and ECMAScript releases, right? I will be sharing these slides tomorrow at the end of the our session, right? So you will get the slides as well as the recording. And you can also ask any questions in the group if you have in particular.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Anybody else with a question? जी मोहसिन.
सर अगर हम एडवांस जावास्क्रिप्ट सीखना चाहते हैं तो इसके लिए कोई वेबसाइट जहाँ से हम सर्टिफिकेशन भी ले और कोर्स भी लर्न करें, अगर आपको पता है?
There are plenty, but I would suggest free code camp. Simple, very interactive, and I myself learn from free code camp, or to there are plenty. Coursera are having courses. Udemy is available with a lot of courses, and also I would suggest LinkedIn Learning. They if you're not having a premium account, I guess you haven't purchased a subscription, so you get 1 year free subscription, right? So LinkedIn Learning is also a healthy choice. They have like content from very digestible and not so much advanced. So for beginners, LinkedIn Learning is also a good choice. And apart from that, my recommendation is Free Code Camp.
सर मेरा एक क्वेश्चन है
जी
क्वेश्चन ये है कि मैंने ECMAScript और JavaScript कंप्लीट किया है मैं React.js पे काम कर रहा हूँ अभी लेकिन सर React.js के लिए Udemy कोर्स है आपके साथ कुछ रेफरेंस वगैरह
I do not have in particular I would say मेरे पास कोर्स तो नहीं है लेकिन if I manage to have or if I have contact with you, so I would definitely provide.
Yes, sir. क्योंकि React.js YouTube पे है लेकिन उसमें क्लियरेंस ही नहीं है बहुत ज़्यादा डाउट होते हैं
you can
वगैरह
for now I do not have recommendations, but it's a good I've now been having this in mind. I would ask and I would find it myself, or मुझे जो भी अच्छे अगर YouTube channel हो या कोई और resources हो तो I would definitely try to share. I'm not promising it, but if they come across
sir,
so I will inshallah share.
सर कल जो भी सेशन होगा उसमें ECMAScript कंप्लीट डिटेल से बता दो क्योंकि उसमें ज्यादा चीजें React.js यूज करती है इसलिए
I'm keeping things to be very honest very basic. ठीक है मैं कोई भी extensive प्रोग्रामिंग नहीं करूंगा बेसिक मैं बार बार मार्केटिंग में मैंने ये यूज किया है कि प्रोग्रामिंग फंडामेंटल्स मैं चाहता हूँ अटेंड वो भी करे जो कि मतलब प्रोफेशनल है. देयर इज नो हार्म इन अटेंडिंग माय सेशन फॉर व्हाट आई विल बी डूइंग टुमारो, लेकिन अगेन इट इज बेसिक एंड इट इज बेसिक ऑन पर्पस. ठीक है कि आप बेसिक को पढ़ ले, उनको उसका हैंड्स ऑन देख ले, आप उस पर बिल्ड कर सकते हो। जो एडवांस स्टफ होता है वो आप हमेशा खुद कर सकते हो। आपको स्टार्ट में जो न्यूबीज है जो स्टार्ट कर रहे हैं जावास्क्रिप्ट में या प्रोग्रामिंग में, उनको
सही।
स्टार्ट में वो पुश चाहिए। तो दिस इज प्लान्ड फॉर दैट पुश, और इंशाल्लाह दिस कम्युनिटी विल कम अप विद more events where we can definitely look upon something advanced for professional ones and for those who are intermediate coders and programmers.
सर कल आपकी सेशन में एक स्क्रिप्ट है या नहीं?
ECMAScript 5 6 हम
E6
टच करेंगे। उसमें जो उसके कॉन्सेप्ट्स होंगे वो मैंने इंक्लूड नहीं किए हैं, ES5 के होंगे। मतलब जो हम उस पर डिस्कशन कर सकते हैं, आई एम ओपन टू डिस्कस, हम लास्ट में भी डिस्कस कर सकते हैं उसके फीचर्स और एवरीथिंग। लेकिन हम जो है अगेन प्रोग्रामिंग फंडामेंटल्स को डिस्कस करेंगे, और जो कॉन्सेप्ट्स बेसिक एसेंशियल कॉन्सेप्ट्स हैं हम उसको डील करेंगे। तो दैट इज नॉट नेसेसरीली इम्पोर्टेंट फॉर मी टू डील इट इन ES6, वो ES5 में भी हो सकता है, क्योंकि दोनों में ES5 is quite stable too. Getting it?
Okay, sir. But mostly, sir, use the E6. I teach the E5. Difference between E6 and
If you
E5.
if you know ES6, and if you know the concepts in ES6, with a day or two you can switch to if you know about ES5, in a day or two you can switch to ES6, is what I think.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir, so much.
Welcome. If we do not have any further questions, we can conclude our session for tonight. Okay, so if there are any further question, the group chat is open. The WhatsApp group chat is open, and you guys are welcome to ask there. And whenever and as soon I can, I would try to reply to your queries. And I would request you all to be in time tomorrow, so that we don't have this interruption of switching back and forth into to slides and then to admitting the attendees, right? So thank you so much, and wish you a very good night, and see you tomorrow uh, in tomorrow's session, right?
Okay, sir. Allah Hafiz. Good night. Take
Allah
care.
Hafiz. Thank you so much. Allah Hafiz.